Hello, in this section we'll be talking about playlist playback. But first, let's talk about the hardware first. To make sure that you have the best range of your hardware, make sure that you turn off the wireless on your laptop and keep the base station as far away from any electronics as possible. Also, make sure that you use the long-range dipole antenna, as that will give you added range as well. Now, the hardware itself is a base station, which is a simple transceiver, and it's connected to your laptop through a USB cable. When you first connect that USB cable, the light on the front of the hardware will go from red to green to off, and that signifies that the internal workings are operating correctly. When you power up MediaStar with the hardware connected, the light will turn red. This means that there's a proper connection between the software and the hardware. Now, once this is done, you are ready to play your playlist. To play the playlist, simply select the playlist that you want and hit the Play Playlist button. Also, it's important to note that if you select a specific track, it will start at that track instead of the first track in your playlist. So for example, if I were to select Magic Bottle, which is track number 4, and hit Play Playlist, it will cue to this fourth track. When you hit the button, this window will appear full screen, but for the purposes of this video, we have sized it down so it would fit properly. Now, there are 5 different sections of this window. The first is the current track, which is this top section right here. Then the second section is the next track that will queue up after this one is finished. The third one is the notes field, which has all the notes that you might have for this current track. Then you have the playlist display, which gives you the name of the playlist and the timeline that tells you the progress of your track. And lastly, you have your action buttons. Each button does something a little bit different. Obviously, this is the previous button, which does the previous and backwards function, which either goes back to the previous hard mark if that's applicable, or goes back to the previous track. The next button fades if the track is playing and goes to the next hard mark if it is not. And this is a simple play pause button. This button will exit playlist playback. This button will terminate a PowerPoint if one is active. And the show DMX button opens up or brings to the front any DMX software that you might have running, just so that you can turn things off and on by hand. Now, your remote may do different things depending on what you configured in the initial setup. But by default, button number 1 will play and pause. Button number 2 will fade if the track is playing, or go to the next track or hard pause if it is not. Pressing buttons 1 and 2 together will go to the previous hard mark or track if applicable. Pressing button 3 will decrease the volume, master volume. Button number 4 will increase the master volume. And pressing buttons 3 and 4 together will reset the master volume to the default setting. Now, if you were to actually press button number 1 to play the track, you'll notice that the color changes. This is to signify that the track is actually playing. Green means it's playing, red means it's not. So if I were to press it again, red means stopped. Now you'll notice that this is exactly what the light on the base station is representing. If the software is red, the light is red. If the software is green, the light is green, and so on and so forth. This is just so that the hardware is able to give you an accurate description of what is going on if for some chance you cannot see the screen. Now, there needs to be some indication that it received a button press that does not change the color. For example, if I were to go to the next track is not going to be playing, so the color will always still be red. But there needs to be some cue to you that the signal was received. So what we do is we flash the screen black momentarily, as you'll see now. This is just so that you know that the button press was received and everything is working correctly. Now, it's also very important to note that if you were playing a PowerPoint and you press buttons 3 and 4 together, that automatically ends the PowerPoint. And that any time that a PowerPoint is queued, it is not active until you press the play button. And then your next and fade advances a slide, and your previous goes backwards a slide. Also, if you were to double click on the playlist label, it would go to the very first track in your playlist. So let me demonstrate this by going forward some tracks and then double clicking here. It would go back to the very first track in your playlist, and it's quite useful for doing a reset in the case that you're on stage and you just want to go back to the beginning. Now, when you exit the playlist, this button changes to resume, and this is because it knows where you left off. It knows that the last track that you were queued to, in this case, was Family. So when you press resume playlist, it will be queued to that instead of the first track. Also, when you open up MediaStar the next time, it will automatically open the last playlist that you were at and automatically queue up to the last song that you were queued to. This is a very convenient feature because generally you will be using the same playlist many times over and over, and it eliminates you from having to load that playlist in and play the playlist yourself. Also, if you are not registered, there is one small limitation. Playback is limited to 10 seconds. After 10 seconds of playback, a little dialog box will appear notifying you of the limitation, and playback will terminate. As a convenience to you, the performer, we have made it so that if you have your hardware connected, the registration is suppressed. Because obviously, if you have the hardware, you have paid for the system, and there's no reason to limit you. Also, it allows you to use someone else's computer in case yours breaks on the road or something bad happens. You would simply need to copy your library from one computer to the other, connect your hardware, and you'd be back in action right there and then. This concludes this tutorial, and we hope you have many good times using MediaStar.